Okay, let's talk about Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed wickedest man on earth. He was born in 1875 and he died in 1947, just after World War II. He was an English occultist, ceremonial magician, poet, painter, novelist, and mountaineer. And he founded the religion of Thelema, identifying himself as the prophet entrusted with guiding humanity into the Aeon of Horus in the early 20th century. And he was also a prolific writer and published many books. Now, he was born to a wealthy family, and he rejected the fundamentalist Christian faith that he was brought up in. And he pursued an interest in Western esotericism. Now, he was educated at the University of Cambridge. This gentleman was privileged. He didn't have to work for a living, and he inherited a lot of money, which allowed him to pursue his interests. At one point, some alleged that he actually worked for the British intelligence agency and was a spy throughout his life. In 1898, he joined the esoteric Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and he was trained in ceremonial magic by Samuel Little McGregor Mathers and Alan Bennett. Now, he went to Scotland and went mountaineering in Mexico before studying Hindu and Buddhist practices in India. He married a woman named Rose Edith Kelly, and in 1904, they honeymooned in Cairo, Egypt, and that is where Crowley claims to have come into contact with a supernatural entity named Aiwass. Aiwass provided him, through his wife Rose, who was a channeler, the Book of the Law. It was supposed to be a sacred text that served as the basis for Thelema and announcing the start of the Aeon of Horus. The book declared that its followers should do what thou wilt and seek to align themselves with their true will through the practice of magic. Now, those who are not familiar with the Order of the Golden Dawn, it was a magical society in the 19th century, and it was a group of several people. It didn't seem to have very many people, over 100 at that time, that studied things that were pretty much prohibited by the church. And they had founders. The three founders were William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Little McGregor Matthews. And all of them were Freemasons and Rosicrucians. Now, the Golden Dawn, it was based on a hierarchy, and it included initiations similar to the Masonic lodges. The first order taught esoteric philosophy based on Hermetic Kabbalah and personal development and awareness of the four classical elements, as well as the basics of astrology, tarot, divination, and geomancy. The second inner order, or Ruby Rose, or Cross of the Gold, taught magic, including scrying, astral travel, and alchemy. And the third order was that of the secret chiefs, who were said to be highly skilled, and they were able to direct the activities of lower order of spirit communication with the chiefs of the second order. Now, when Crowley entered in, he got into a fight with Mathers. Mathers didn't like what he was doing after a certain point, and vice versa. And Crowley was eventually kicked out, I believe, and went on to create his own society, which was Thelema. But there is a lot of talk about what went on between the two of them. Now, the gentleman that I just mentioned, Mathers, was said to have been a friend of Crowley, and then they got it on the outs. Crowley alleged that Mathers was in the habit of playing chess matches against various pagan gods, and that he would set up a chessboard and seat himself behind the white pieces with an empty chair opposite of him. After making a move for himself, Mathers would then shade his eyes and peer towards the empty chair, waiting for his opponent to signal a move. Mathers would then move a black piece accordingly, then make his next move as white, and so forth. And Crowley never recorded who won. So it's interesting because in another book that wasn't written by Crowley, it was called The Black Arts, written by Richard Cavendish. A very good discussion of what went on between Crowley and Mathers is discussed. Now, Richard Cavendish was born in 1930, and he recently died last year in 2016. He was a British historian who wrote extensively on the subject of occultism, religion, and tarot, as well as mythology. And his book, called The Black Arts, gives a very good idea of what is behind magic, and that is the book that I have referenced, the table that he gave associating the Greek gods with the Kabbalah, Sephiroths. But he also gives a very good account of what magicians do and how they deal with these invisible entities. And here we go again. All of these people that are in the occult keep dealing with these entities, and eventually they'll claim that these entities may appear to them. But it seems to be the same thing over and over. The invisible people communicating telepathically, and sometimes they do hear it verbally, seem to give them directions or tell them what to write, and on and on and on. Now, I want to find the part that is discussing what went on between Crowley and Mathers. Page 35 of The Black Arts, it says, according to Mrs. Mathers in her introduction to the 1938 edition of her husband's Kabbalah Unveiled, the Golden Dawn studied the intelligent forces behind nature, the constitution of man and his relationship to God, with the good magical objective that man may ultimately regain union with the divine man latent in himself. In spite of this high aim, the order was soon disrupted by personal quarrels, especially after Aleister Crowley became a member and attempted to seize the leadership from Mathers. Many of the members complained that Mathers had absurdly high pretensions. He announced that he was spiritually directed from the temple of the Holy Spirit, and the society broke up in quarreling and confusion. It was later revived and reconstituted under the respected leadership of A.E. Waite. Mathers and his wife Moina, the sister of the philosopher Henry Bergson, lived in Paris. Mathers tried to convert Bergson to magic, but without success. Their house was decorated as an Egyptian temple, and they celebrated Egyptian masses, invoking the goddess Isis. Mathers officiated in a long white robe, a metal belt engraved with the signs of the zodiac, bracelets around his wrists and ankles, and a leopard skin slung across his shoulders. He was convinced that he was descended from the Scottish clan MacGregor and took to calling himself MacGregor Mathers, Chevalier MacGregor, and Comte de Glenstray. W.B. Yeats, whose magical name in the Golden Dawn was Daemon Asdu Inversus, the devil is God reversed, was a frequent visitor to the Mathers household in Paris. In the evenings, they used to play a peculiar form of chess for 4 players. Yeats and Mrs. Mathers played against Mathers and a spirit. Before moving his spirit partner's piece, Mathers would shade his eyes and stare earnestly at the spirit's empty chair at the other side of the board. End quote. Now, Richard Cavendish, in his book The Black Arts, goes on to talk about Crowley. And his wife, Rose, he says she took to drink and Crowley eventually divorced her. Crowley joined the Order of the Golden Dawn in 1898, taking the magical name of Brother Perdurabo, I shall endure. End quote. He was, and it says, expelled from the Golden Dawn. Crowley founded his own society, the Thelema, but its membership was never as numerous or as distinguished as the Golden Dawn's. By 1914, it had 38 members. In 1910, Mathers ordered a court order to stop Crowley from publishing the Golden Dawn's secrets in his magazine, The Equinox. Crowley appealed against this order and rather impertinently used a talisman from the sacred magic of Abramelin, which Mathers had translated, the one recommended for gaining the affection of a judge. The talisman was effective and Crowley's appeal was successful. This talisman consists of the following letters written on parchment. And then, end quote, the book talks about what he did. It continues on. It says, sexuality runs all through Crowley's poetry and magical writings. He had a remarkable appetite for women and was apparently very attractive to them. He wore a special perfume of immortality, made of 1 part ambergris, 2 parts musk, and 3 parts civet, which gave him a peculiar odor, but which he said attracted women and also horses, which always whinnied after him in the streets. In 1912, the leaders of a German occult society specializing in sex magic, the Order of Templars of the Orient, were alarmed by the fact that Crowley was publishing their order's secrets in the Equinox. They approached him in London, found that he had discovered these secrets independently through his own researches, and invited him to join the order. He became British head of the OTO with the title of Supreme and Holy King of Ireland, Iona, and all the Britons that are the sanctuary of the Gnosis. End quote. And then it goes on in the book, it says, in 1920, he went to Cefalù in Sicily and set up the sacred abbey of Thelema with his current mistress, the Scarlet Woman, and Sister Cyprus, a name of Aphrodite. Very few disciples arrived and very little money. Crowley was in urgent need for both for most of his life. Rumors of abominable rites and orgies, some of them well-founded, floated out from the abbey, and Mussolini's government expelled Crowley in 1923. He was later expelled from France as well, and wandered forlornly from England to Germany and Portugal and back again, much in the eye of the popular press, which called him the wickedest man in the world. He himself preferred the title the Great Beast, end quote. So he was quite notorious, but my concern is what he wrote in the Book of the Law, and I'm going to read some of this. And it's actually quite disturbing. And let's go. On page 15, it says, all men and women are invited to cooperate with the Master Therian in this, the great work. Okay, end quote. We've heard that term before. Now, let's go to page 31. It says, quote, I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness, to worship me, take wine and strange drugs, whereof I will tell my prophet, and be drunk thereof. They shall not harm ye at all, It is a lie, this folly against self. The exposure of innocence is a lie. Be strong, O man, just enjoy all things of sense and rapture. Fear not that any God shall deny thee for this. I am alone, there is no God where I am. End quote. Continuing on page 40, it says, Thou shalt thyself convey it with worship, O prophet, though thou likest it not. Thou shalt have danger and trouble. Rahu is with thee. Worship me with fire and blood. Worship me with swords and with spears. Let the woman be grit with the sword before me. Let blood flow to my name. Trample down the heathen. Be upon them, O warrior. I will give you of their flesh to eat. Sacrifice cattle, little and big, after a child, but not now. End quote. Page 41. The best blood is of the moon monthly, then the fresh blood of a child, or dropping from the host of heaven, then of enemies, then of the priest, or of that worshippers, last of some beast, no matter what. End quote. Page 42. This burn of this make cakes and eat unto me. This hath also another use. Let it be laid before me, and kept thick with perfumes of your orris, and it shall become full of beetles as it were, and creeping things sacred unto me. End quote. Okay, so, and lastly at the end it says, the book of the law is written on page 49 and concealed Amha. Okay, end quote. It doesn't say kid. I've seen online some people arguing that it's not supposed to say child, it's supposed to say kid as in goat. But in this book I have, it says child. It's spelled CHILD. And that is rather disturbing. And if you're making that into something to eat, that's cannibalism. So by the very nature of what he wrote, I really don't want anything to do with this, and I would suggest the same to you. He did do some tarot cards, and they're a little different than the Rider-Waite, which the Rider-Waite I can understand a little better, but the tarot cards that he created, he added some, but they're more serpentine, a little bit more telling. To me, they are more along the lines of Clip-Off, whereas the Rider-Waite are more along the lines of Kabbalah. It's interesting because both decks had a woman illustrator. Crowley had hired a woman, and so did Waite. They had hired a woman to create the Rider-Waite tarot deck, and that was Pamela Coleman Smith, who created the artwork for that. But now that I've told you what his thing was about, the other thing I want to, it's interesting to also point out that he had drawn some pictures of this AWAS that allegedly all over the internet looks like a little ET. Some say it is. I've seen other sites say it's a self-portrait. It says Lam is the Tibetan word for the way or path, and Lama, he who goeth, the specific title of the gods of Egypt, the treader of the path in Buddhist phraseology. So I don't know what to say about it. I mean, it does look a little peculiar, and I mean, it could be something symbolic. I don't know, or it could be, as they say, what he was channeling. And if that's the case, it looks to me non-human and has that large bulbous head again. Now, lastly, I think Crowley was a heroin addict, and from what I know, he ended up alone and broke in the end. but he I guess he'd converted to Buddhism. So he didn't have to work. He didn't have to sweat to work, and probably was some sort of a spy. And he was able to just explore whatever he wanted to do. And we don't know if he was practicing human sacrifice or not. Many people say he was, others say he wasn't. Just by the nature of what he wrote, like I said, I don't want anything to do with this. And it's not something I want to get too involved in and study. But it does show you that, once again, these occultists are talking to these invisible entities that telepathically communicate, or at some point they even claim that they hear them verbally and tell them what to write down. And then they allegedly practice magic as well. So that is Aleister Crowley, and like I said, I would be concerned about what he was involved in. You can't say love is the law and then start killing things, especially people, and claiming that's love. No, it's not. Okay, that's it. Aleister Crowley.